Hello and welcome back to Kaiti Draws. On this episode today, I wanted to celebrate Native American Heritage Month. I know I'm very close to the end here. I apologize. I really wanted to do this episode pre-November 24th, which is Native American Heritage Day. So the story we're going to tell is about the Cherokee Corn Mother Selu or Selu. There's a few things I want to talk about. First is, of course, her legend, the significance, and the relation to the actual practices and cultural norms of Cherokee society, at least when it comes to pre-colonization, and how some of those practices were not acceptable as far as the European colonizers went, and some of the aftermath, what happened to the Cherokee, and go into a little bit more of American history here, just because there's a lot of things that I learned about. It's amazing how many things we glaze over in school, right? So let's begin by talking about the actual story of Selu. We begin with the origin story. It is about Kaiti and Selu. So Kaiti is also considered the lucky hunter, and Kaiti is Shelu's husband. Kaiti would come back home from his hunt, give Selu his game, and then she would clean it at the river. One of those days, the couple heard their only child playing with another person, and their son actually told them that the other child came out of the water, and he called himself his older brother. Selu and her husband knew that this child was probably from the meat that Selu cleaned at the river. They took the boy from the river and raised him as their own, but the boy was mischievous. In fact, in some cases, he's considered maybe even a little evil, probably not to that extreme. One of the days that Kaiti is out hunting, Selu is there, and the boys tell Selu that they are hungry. They notice that she would, every time she would go clean at the river, she would go to the storehouse to get food most of the time, and she would just walk out with beans and corn. So they decided to kind of see what was going on there. When they asked her for some food, she picked up her basket. She went to the storehouse as usual to go get some food. The boys were sneaking around and they went to follow her. When they got to the storehouse, they peeked in through the walls, and what they saw, they couldn't really believe. Selu was in there, she was rubbing her stomach, and corn would suddenly appear in her basket. She would then rub under her arms, and then beans would fill in her basket. The boys had decided that she was performing witchcraft and that she had to be killed. Selu, being a supernatural entity and kind of not all-knowing, but pretty knowledgeable, she knew that the boys were going to kill her. So she said that after she was dead, they needed to make a big circle, and they would have to drag her body around the circle 7 times and then drag it inside 7 times. And when they did that, they would be able to see that corn has grown from her blood. So regardless of all of this, the boys do end up killing their mother. They don't follow her instructions to the T. So they did drag Selu's body around them, her blood flowing, and they did watch the corn grow all night and into the morning. Corn grew wherever Shelu's blood had fallen. Selu is called the Corn Mother because her blood gives life to corn, and it sustains the Cherokee people. Selu translates to corn, and because the boys didn't follow the instructions to a T, corn only originated in one location, which was the Americas. If they had listened, the possibility of corn being grown across the entire world for ancient civilizations would have happened, according to legend. Which leads me to how powerful this story is and how it talks about gender norms amongst the Cherokee people pre-European colonization. The story of Selu is an interaction between 2 sons and their mother. It is a tale of maternal sacrifice. of female agricultural responsibility. The blood for some scholars is actually indicative of this being a very powerful force, feminine force. The blood from her body is actually giving life and sustenance, enough life to sustain the Cherokee people. She is the one that passes down the knowledge to her sons so that they can continue to keep the Cherokee people in prosperity with corn and beans and being able to sustain themselves. That is the lesson of their mother, and those are the skills that she actually has given them. There is equality as well. Her husband Kaiti is the hunter and also provides some sustenance as well. There is equal responsibility between the female and male members of the Cherokee Nation. In fact, the Cherokee were a matrilineal society. Women were the landowners. Most children would end up living with their mothers or living with their wives. Mothers were the heads of the household. And most of the time, because this was also a polygamist society, men usually didn't stick around. A woman's children would more likely be taught by her brother, so an uncle, versus the actual father of the family, which is very, very different from especially European culture in the 1700s and 1800s, very patrilineal, which we clearly have still today. So Cherokee women would invoke motherhood as a source of their power and use their status as mothers to make public appeals. Women were the ones who played a major role in the tribe. They were usually the ones who would create treaties and be arbiters of justice. In fact, that was one of the more confusing things for a lot of the European colonizers, is that women would often come up and even try to reason with them to talk to European women because they believed that European women had the same amount of power. So, of course, you can see already we're seeing a disconnect here. I'm only briefly going to touch on some of the Native American history here, but I do think it's important because we are talking about Native American Heritage Month. Many Native American tribes actually had decent alliances and had trade agreements with a lot of the European settlers. Some of the problems here were that the Native American tribes were allied with different European nations. You can look at the French-Indian War, for instance. This resulted in Native Americans fighting each other even further and basically fighting some European wars for the settlers and for the nations across the water. There were re-education programs during this period of time where a lot of the Native American people would be in their homeland, but then they were required to learn more about the Western way, the European way. Some tribes were receptive to it, such as the Cherokee. There is a ton of history here, and I urge you to do your research and learn more about it. I'm briefly going to talk about the Trail of Tears. This was a forced displacement of 60,000 plus people, and this is from the 5 civilized tribes, end quote. And this includes the Cherokee. This lasted over the course of a couple of years. In 1830, the Indian Removal Act was passed. So the reason was because there was gold that was found on Cherokee lands. This is the history that's for the Cherokee. So Georgia actually held lotteries to give Cherokee land and gold rights to whites. And the Cherokees were not allowed to conduct tribal business, contract, testify in courts against whites, or mine for gold. So this is actually a really big deal because the Cherokee successfully challenged Georgia in the U.S. Supreme Court. The Cherokee were still displaced and pushed out of their lands. They had to migrate to an area that is now in present-day Oklahoma, so it had to be west of the Mississippi River. This journey across many states, at least 5 states, had devastating effects. They faced hunger, disease, exhaustion. They had to leave in the middle of winter time, and most of them were not able to prepare. They didn't have the ability to take food with them or anything of the sort. They just had to pick up and go. So out of 15,000 Cherokee, about 4,000 people passed over this journey. Again, I do have some links in the description below if you want to learn more about some of the history here and the after effects. But I really want to emphasize that some of these myths and these stories shed a lot of light on some of the cultural norms of Cherokee life pre-European colonization. These stories are still shared today, and they haven't changed a ton even since this period of time. There's still a lot of significance to the story of Selu and Kaiti. I hope you enjoyed learning more about the Cherokee and Selu and Kaiti and a little bit of American history. Just a touch. Again, I'm sorry that I'm so late in posting this video. Hopefully it won't be as late next month. If you enjoy my art, make sure to follow me on my socials, which is in the description down below. If you like art, mythology, drawing videos, anything like that, make sure to follow, subscribe, and comment. Let me know what kind of myths and folktales you enjoy. You can keep learning and checking out some other myths on my channel. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you in the next video.